Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 205, and I'm delighted to be joined by first team performance coach at Port Vale, Paul Mcgrath. Paul, how are we?
Hi, Ben. All good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. I'm keen to catch up. It's been a little while since we've caught, probably Oxford, is it?
Yeah, Oxford event. Yeah. Very good event at Oxford. Really enjoyed that. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'd be good, mate. We've got loads of stuff to cover, so I want to jump into it. But kick us off, mate. Your background, where have you been? What's led to Port Vale?
Yeah, sure. So originally from Dublin, Dublin in Ireland, and probably had a little bit of a different route into S&C, sports science, than a lot of people. So I started off in teaching. So I went and studied PE and maths teaching in Dublin City University. So that was a 4-year degree. And whilst I was doing that, probably realised, like a lot of people, I wasn't going to make it as a footballer, wasn't good enough. So got my teeth into the coaching side of things pretty early. I was probably 15, 16, 17, started coaching my brother's team and just really got the love for sort of, helping people develop, helping people coach. And there was a lot of sort of similarities between that and teaching for me at the time. So, really got into coaching and then started, thinking about doing my badges. So done the equivalent of the FA level 1 and 2 in Ireland. And then moved to a semi-professional team, Bohemian FC in Dublin as well, and then moved on and done my B license. So was still kind of working away at the teaching degree at the time, was coaching at Bohemians. That was a really good experience, spent 5 years there. And it was probably during that time that I realised, my interest really in the performance side of things, S&C, sports science, and really, started kind of questioning things as to, how what we do during the week, how that has an impact on what you see on a Saturday, how we can develop players further. So I was working with a lot of different age groups at Bowes, right from 15s, 13s, all the way up to under 17s, 19s, which would then progress on into the first team. So that was a really good experience. And probably then in the back of my mind, I was kind of questioning whether, I really sort of want to still go down the teaching route. So I took a year out at university after 2 years. And I done a PT qualification with Stanton College, and then further to that done a strength conditioning qualification with them. So they were absolutely excellent in terms of the resources. It was all online, which suited me. I was kind of working at the time doing a bit of a substitute teaching, and I done an internship up in Queen's University Belfast as well. So I kind of throughout that year I just wanted to throw myself into S&C and personal training and sort of got a feel for whether it was for me or not before then going back to my degree. So, really enjoyed it, met some great people, and then went back to finish my degree. So kind of when I was going back to finish my degree, I kind of had in the back of my head that once I had finished, I then wanted to try and move into professional sport in some way or another. But obviously, in Ireland, there's less opportunities or less clubs as such, football wise anyway, in Ireland to go into a full-time setup. So was kind of keen to potentially go abroad to the UK, which it happened, and do a master's. So was lucky enough to get the opportunity at Lincoln City, with the director of football there, and I was really lucky to get an opportunity to go in there as a sports scientist, working with the academy and then the first team as well. So that was in conjunction to the masters I was studying at the University of Lincoln, which was Masters of Sports Science, and it was a full-on year. There was probably no breathing space, no time for me to do anything else other than study or, coach or do football. But it was absolutely brilliant. It was COVID at the time was obviously, was heavy around the world, and it was probably just the right time for me to do it, because I felt that if there had been too many distractions out there, social life, anything like that, it's just I wouldn't have had the time to sort of concentrate on my degree, on my masters and the work at Lincoln. So that was absolutely brilliant, and it was probably the biggest step so far out of my comfort zone. That I was working at a club for 5 years in Ireland. I kind of got comfortable with the routines, the setup, and everything about it really. And then just to jump to a different club, different country, away from my family. But yeah, it was something really enjoyed. The staff there are absolutely amazing, and had really good time there. Still in contact with a lot of the staff there, and built up a really sort of good network of friends there. Really, they were great. So then from Lincoln City, again, I was keen to kind of develop myself as a practitioner, and probably something that I've tried to always do in the last couple of years anyway is sort of look look at myself and say, right, what do I actually need to develop on? What do I need to develop? What do I need to work on, as a practitioner myself? And I felt that probably on the S&C side of things, pitch-based content, I felt because of my coaching background and coming from a coaching background essentially into S&C, I felt I was fairly confident on that side of things. But managing interns, it was at the time at Lincoln City, I felt that was definitely an area for me to develop on, and that's what the opportunity came up to move to Portsmouth, leading the academy S&C provision, and it was one from speaking to the academy manager, just getting the vision for the academy and the sort of feel for the place, it was one that I jumped at. And yeah, that was a great experience, working with a great group of players, great group of coaches, and again, still in touch at the moment. But yeah, that was a great experience, sort of leading the provision and probably doing stuff that I wouldn't be as au fait with in terms of managing department budgets, department meetings, multidisciplinary meetings, academy manager meetings, all that sort of stuff that people probably don't see as much of, and sort of getting the vision for the sports science department, how we move it forward, how we sort of develop players within the academy to move the club on. So that was a really good time. I spent the season there, and then an opportunity came up this summer to move to Port Vale as a first team performance coach, and that was one that, from speaking to the club, speaking to the director of football, and to speaking to the manager, it was one straight away that I could see the interest they had in developing the club. The club recently got promoted the back end of last season, and there was a real good vibe around the place. Everyone really, really friendly, and not just in terms of the whole context of the club, but for me it was their interest in developing the sports science department and performance department, medical, sports science, everything around sort of the team around the team as such. So that's something that really appealed to me, and got the backing straight away as soon as it came in. And with a couple of staff, there's been a couple of changes at the club, and we've really got the backing to sort of develop what we feel is best practice and move this club forward. So yeah, I've been really enjoying it here ever since.
Mate, quality. There's a couple of things that stand out for me. Firstly, something that we spoke about a lot recently is like knowing your values and sort of question opportunities that are out there and making sure it sort of fits at the right time for you. And that's obviously something you've took into consideration a lot in the moves that you've gone through. And then the other thing, which you wouldn't actually know because I've only just literally released it just as we started recording then, but in the previous episode with Dave O'Sullivan, a physio, he spoke about CPD and splitting your CPD up into different attributes of a practitioner. And then focusing on the areas that you need then to work on. So rather than us always going to CPD events or working on things that we're generally just good at anyway, actually noticing where we need to work. And that's exactly what you've covered. So it was really interesting you mentioned it.
Yes, I don't think it's easy. I think it's probably something that, everyone should really do, because at the end of the day, you're still always developing. Like I look at myself now and I kind of say, geez, there's so much I really don't know. I need to go back to university. It's just like you're always developing. I think every day is a learning day. I know it's a cliche, but I think looking at yourself and saying, right, what are my strengths? And you always want to develop your strengths. That's obviously really important, because that's what makes you stand out. But I think, having that critical eye and saying, right, what do I actually need to improve on, and how can those around me or my environment help me? And that's something that I've been really fortunate to have at this moment, like the medical staff. For me, I think at this moment in time, probably the medical side of things is something that I need to improve on myself. I need to develop my knowledge in that area. And the staff have been absolutely brilliant with me with that, sort of explaining their understanding, around certain things, and especially the rehabilitation side of things, which I'd be heavily involved in as well. So, that's been great at the club.
Yeah, brilliant. No, that really stands out, and it's great to hear you talking like that, because I think that practice in itself of actually like reflecting on things and maybe even writing down strengths, weaknesses, and getting feedback from other people is really important, isn't it? Because then what you read, what you study, and things can be guided by that, then, can't they?
Yeah, for sure. And again, it's a sort of like, I think an appraisal sort of format. I think like a lot of people shy away from appraisals or kind of say, oh no, I don't want to say anything bad about this person. You know, they might take it in the wrong way. But I think there's a way of sort of saying things that can be used in a sort of a positive, constructive manner to help the person. Because, you know, I think that's the sort of mindset that everyone should have. You know, you're getting feedback from someone, you know, if they didn't really care about you or your development, they wouldn't be giving you that feedback or that sort of, you know, information to then improve your practice. So I think you should always be taken in a positive way.
Yeah, brilliant. Paul, how would you sort of define your approach in terms of S&C? I know that's quite a big question. You could probably go down a lot of different pathways with it, but overall, how would you sort of define your approach?
Yeah, I think for me, I would see myself, you know, I know strength and conditioning, a lot of people say, you know, it's sports science related, you're kind of, you know, data whiz and stuff like that. I'm certainly not. I would see myself as a coach and, you know, as a person that, you know, wants to get to know people, wants to build relationships with people. And I think having the person at the center of things is absolutely critical. I think that's pivotal to anyone working, you know, in sport, because at the end of the day, it's about the people. And yeah, I would always try and have the person at the forefront of everything we do. I think, like, you know, taking a step back and realizing, right, in the grand scheme of things, you know, as a backroom staff, your role isn't in the limelight. You know, you're not the one that's on the pitch playing football. The players are the most important, and the time, especially, you know, at a first team level in the EFL, it's so precious. You know, there's so many fixtures, Tuesday, Saturday. You know, you don't have much time on the grass. So I think something I've always tried to do, and that's why I was keen to sort of continue with my coaching badges, is to be able to work collaboratively with the coaches, you know, so be that in the morning meetings, discussing, you know, pitch sizes, you know, type of areas we're going to use, whether it's working on accel, decels. And again, you know, the sort of language we use, you know, they're going to say, all right, we're working in small sided games, say we're working in large sided games, medium size, whatever. But in the back of your mind, I'm kind of thinking from a physical point of view, right, that's going to hit my accel, decels that I'm looking for. That's going to hit my maximum velocity meterage per minute, whatever it is on a certain day. So I think working smarter, not harder, in that sort of way with the coaches, and sort of the planning element is probably something that, you know, I think is really, really important, because if we can come together as a whole and sort of say, right, we have a session here today that's going to tick, you know, the technical outcomes that we're looking for, the tactical outcomes, you know, the physical, you know, and potentially maybe some of the mental outcomes, or, you know, so I think that's really the challenge that coaches have every day, is hitting the four corners as such. Yeah, I think there's definitely going to be times where, you know, you have to do stuff in isolation, and that's where, like, top up sessions, and that's where I kind of say, right, you know, I've 10, 15 minutes of a warm up today, maybe they've done a little bit less of something the previous day or whatever it might be. Can I top them up in that area today without kind of being of the detriment of the whole session? So yeah, I think collaboration is key, and probably understanding what the manager and the coaching staff want. What's the style of play? You know, is it, right, we're a high pressing team that, you know, ultimately as performance staff, we need to prepare the players to be able to play that style of play. You know, and just kind of all being on the same hymn sheet, because I think, you know, we probably as performance staff spend the most time with the players, you know, and they come to us first thing in the morning, you know, whether in the physio room, in the gym, well, what's the plan for today? What's, you know, what are we doing? What they, you know, they're curious as you would expect them to be, you know, and I think it's probably a bit remiss of us if we don't have the answers then, right, you're doing this, this, and this. And again, you know, the things do come up, and there will be days where there's last minute changes and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, having that plan in place and everyone being on the same hymn sheet, I think, is crucial.
Yeah, definitely. What I wanted to ask Paul as well is the teaching background and the experience that you have with teaching. How does that sort of work in your current role now? Do you see any sort of crossovers?
Yeah, I definitely think there's crossover and similarities in terms of how you deal with people, how you kind of get your information across, and I think that for me, I think is probably the toughest skill, is how you sort of, yeah, how you manage individuals, because you're dealing with a squad of 25, 26, you know, however high it might be numbers wise, and everyone's different in their own little way, and I think that's a skill in itself. And probably looking back, you know, I'm at my teaching degree, and I'm kind of saying, right, maybe I should have done a sports science degree. But I think like maybe something that's missing from a lot of the sports science degrees out there is actually the teaching element. You know, you're going into an environment potentially afterwards where you're going to have to coach, you know, and I know there's work placements and everything like that, but I think actually the transfer of information from you to the athlete is absolutely crucial. And sometimes it's, you know, you kind of might feel, right, I know so much, I've learned so much at uni, I need to, you know, let them know I know everything. But sometimes just being a little bit smart, I think, with the information we tell them, and sort of, you know, telling them the information that we want them to hear, or that they need to hear at a certain moment in time. And that's kind of getting that balance, really.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like you say, that's where the real key relationship and that trust comes from, when you can actually speak the language that someone understands. Like we don't want to be out there to be using loads of scientific terms and
100%.
confusing people, do we? Like, and that's where that communication comes.
I think it's probably important as well for us, as, you know, we're working in a football environment, and although footballers that come into the environment, that, you know, they love being here every day and stuff like that, but that profession won't last forever, and it's kind of like, right, well, what happens afterwards? So I think we would be doing them a disservice if we don't sort of educate them along the way. And I think like we spend so much time with players every single day, and I think, you know, every single day they should come out with a nugget, you know, a bit of information to sort of say, right, God, I learned this today. I'm not saying you're going to bring the players, you know, into a classroom and start teaching them sort of lessons every day, but I think, you know, there's not more than I'd love to see in a couple of years' time, see someone I've coached previously and say, God, they're still active in the gym. They're keeping fit. They're still playing football. And it's just, I think that's what we need to be kind of mindful of as well, is that, you know, we're potentially educating these players as well, especially working in academies. And that's what I found at Portsmouth and Lincoln, was that, you know, players are sponges. They take in all the information you give them. And, you know, ultimately you're there educating them every day on the pitch and in the gym. And, you know, you're their teacher as such.
Yeah, brilliant. With this crazy schedule, Paul, like you've mentioned, the sort of time that you're spending with players, especially this season, I imagine is pretty limited. So maximizing windows of opportunity becomes really important, doesn't it? But
100%.
How do you go about that practically? How does that look throughout a week or even a month for the season?
Yeah, I think you probably have to look at every single point of contact you have with the players and say, right, you know, pre-activation sessions is one, you know, that's fairly sort of regular every day. Your warm-ups, top-up sessions after games, and say, like, you know, on a Saturday to Saturday week, there's more sort of room for getting in, you know, working to players and sort of developing fitness and so what. But I think, you know, especially on the 2-game weeks, being a little bit smarter on the sort of session planning side of things, to sort of incorporate, you know, for example, speed work, whether it's, you know, the coach wants to work on a transition drill, whether it's runs in behind, the course, say, well, you know, God, I'm actually looking to try and get some bout of speed work into the players this week. You know, that's where I'm going to link in with the coach and say, right, can we work together to design this drill to sort of, you know, marry the two together. But I think, like, you know, if you look at the sort of regularities throughout the week, like your pre-activation sessions, your warm-ups, that's every day, you know, without fail. Now, you know, that's not to say every warm-up's the same and a 1-game week is going to be the same as a 2-game week, but I think we have a lot of contact time with the players without us kind of realizing that. And it's, you know, it's easy for us to complain and say, oh God, we don't, you know, have enough time and all that. But I think microdosing work into players throughout the week is key. You know, your activation sessions, can we include some plyometrics, maybe, you know, back end as a sort of potentiation on certain days, and even in warm-ups, can we, you know, have them progressive? Can we, you know, work on skills? Can we work on athletic qualities that can then transfer, you know, into what they're going to do in the session, and sort of develop the sort of athleticism that way. So yeah, I'll kind of look at sort of the windows throughout the week and say, you know, is there sort of chance to microdose some work into players, either in warm-ups or pre-activation sessions?
Do you do anything around game day as well, Paul, like in terms of post-game for players that have had lower minutes or whatever?
Yeah, 100%. And that's one where definitely, like, the art of the skill of, you know, relationships comes in to, you know, no doubt. And it's obviously easy after a win, and, you know, you're the worst person in the world after defeat. But, you know, we're lucky that the buy-in has been great. And I think trying to keep that as a positive moving forward, that, when the players finish the game, they expect to go out, they expect to sort of go out and do a tough session post match if they haven't played enough minutes, because they understand the benefits to it. They understand that, right, I want to be at the level because next week I want to be, physically able to play in the starting 11. And we've even had players to say, right, can I go out and do a little bit more? I just feel I didn't do enough in the game. And that's obviously, managed and monitored through the GPS and live data. But, I think creating a sort of a positive, as much as it's not a positive environment, but trying to create a positive spin on it to sort of say, right, well, as much as I don't want to be out here, in the lashing rain, post game on a wet Tuesday night, I'm doing this for your benefit, and I'm doing it because I care about your development. So like we have some lads that are, say, coming back from injury, and they would say if they don't play, as many minutes as they potentially would like, we would bring them into the gym and they do their post conditioning work in the gym, strength work, to sort of keep building them strength levels, that we need to work on. And I think just sort of creating that buy-in from the players is absolutely crucial with that. But yeah, definitely post game to sort of, because I think if we look at the week as a whole, that's your major bout of exercise or load is the game day. So, obviously the players who play are gonna get that naturally, but it's how we make up that ground with the other players. So even one we've started doing recently is like goalkeeper specific conditioning, because that's something that we'll probably talk about a bit later on, but it's such a niche position that, they have to be treated differently to the outfielders. There's really I don't see the point in goalkeepers going out and doing box to boxes. They're never going to cover that much high speed in the game. So, why would they do it? Yeah, fair enough. It's conditioning, but make it specific to the position and the individual. So I think showing the players that you actually have that level of interest and that care, kind of creates that or helps that buy-in.
And with that, was that already preset at the club in terms of the game day stuff, or was that something, I know the runs probably were, but in terms of any sort of strength stuff that you might do, anything like that, or is that something that you brought in?
Yeah, no, I think it was there when we came in, and the buy-in was good. I think the strength stuff, it can be, when we're at home and we have access to a gym, it's great. We can go in and use our own facilities. Now we've had access to, say, the K box, which is great. It's easily, transferred and things like that. And to be honest with you, we've gone to a couple of places this season where the opposition team have happily said, come in and use our gym with us, and I think that's something that, maybe some teams don't like to do with rivals and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, we're all here to help each other. And I think, it's great to see that some clubs are doing that. But yeah, fortunately enough, the buy-in was there with the players and, everyone towards sort of post-match conditioning when I came in. So, it was a win-win.
Yeah, brilliant. So just back to the goalkeeper conditioning, that's an interesting area because obviously very niche. Something we've actually got on the community is a webinar from Luke Oldham about how he sort of amends his approach with keepers. Brilliant. So it's really interesting and probably something that's not spoke about that much. So what's your approach with them in terms of how does it differ to outfield players?
Yeah, sure. I think like if you look at the demands of the position, very much power based, very much sort of short, sharp movements, a lot of focus on lateral movements, concentric muscle actions. So we would try and focus or have that as our focus in their gym sessions, their pre-activation sessions. And, if we look at sort of pre-activation as a whole, it's mainly based on lower limb sort of, muscle activation. Whereas, goalkeeper goes out and next thing is to dive in the corner, catch a ball, and that's, overhead. So I think overhead work is obviously really, really important for goalkeepers, increasing the range of motion, overhead, stability, and definitely reactions as well. So that's something that I've worked closely with the goalkeeping coach here to sort of devise a periodized plan across the week as to what each activation session looks like and how we can sort of build on it from week to week, and also the gym sessions as well. So whether it's a 1 game week, 2 game week, how they sort of differ, but also then, you're improving the sort of qualities, week on week. But yeah, definitely, I think it's such a sort of unique position, and they're often forgotten about. Like goalkeepers tend to always, often go out, earlier than the outfielders. So they often miss the pre-activation session. They often just go straight out, do work. The goalkeeping coach come in, they might stay a little bit later, so they might miss the gym session. I think they're sometimes just forgotten about, because there's only one or two of them that you just forget. But like you kind of do need to realize that they're the players that probably play the most minutes throughout the season, especially if you have a number one that's consistently, in the team throughout the season. And then on the flip side, you have a number two that maybe doesn't play as many minutes, doesn't play, near as much minutes as anyone else in the squad. How do you sort of manage his workload? How does his workload conditioning work look in comparison to everyone else? So I think it's a really important area to sort of manage the load as well with them guys.
There's a lot of different demands on the body, isn't there? Because when play, especially and this is where I suppose game models come into it. Because if a keeper's doing a lot of kicking,
100%.
and it is a lot of stress, isn't it? Just in a different way.
Yeah, 100%, and that's something that we constantly need to be mindful of. In their conversations with players, and sort of having that sort of relationship with the player that they can come to you on a certain day. Listen, Paul, I'm actually feeling, my legs are really, really tight. It's game day -2. I just don't feel I can do this full gym session. Right, that's fine. We'll tailor it towards what you can do. And then on another day, God, I'm actually feeling really fresh today. Can we, maybe push the boundaries a little bit more? But again, I think that comes back to sort of knowing the individual and knowing sort of his or her capabilities and sort of boundaries, and when to sort of push and when to pull back a little.
And with the gym work, what are some of the main differences you think to Outfield?
Yeah, I think definitely a focus on the concentric element of any sort of exercise is important. I think a lot of sort of power-based exercises are important for them. That's not to say, obviously, strength, they obviously need a good level of strength as a foundation and as a base. But I think we will focus on a lot of sort of power-based exercise, moving in multi-directional planes. So, we'd have bungee ropes to do lateral shuffles, hurdles, ply jumps, different things like that. I think a lot of their work is based around sort of power development, and a lot of it's single leg as well, based on how they're jumping and things like that. And that's where I've kind of worked a lot with the goalkeeping coach to say, right, what's the technique you want them to, what you want to see from them when they're jumping, because some goalkeeping coaches like to see, different things and things like that. So, I think that's important to sort of have the two marry up, because there's no point me, being in the gym with the guys and saying, right, I want you to jump this way, I want you to, land in a certain way, and then you go out on the pitch and it's, he's asking them to do it in a completely different way or a slightly different way, whatever it may be. But yeah, I think power development is absolutely crucial for them, and sort of microdosing that throughout the week, because if you do a 45-50-minute power session, your first set in the first couple of minutes is going to be different to your last set in the last couple of minutes. So sort of, looking at the windows of opportunity throughout the week and sort of seeing where it can fit in.
The one area that I was thinking about when you're talking now, which is, I'm not necessarily expecting an answer to this, but is you don't really hear about how different keepers move, do you? Like in terms of like, there's different techniques there's going to be, because it's a position with different technique.
100%, and that's something that I've never played goal. I've never had much interest in goalkeepers as a whole, because I think you can sometimes, I just think sometimes they can be forgotten about. I think it's like their movement patterns or movement style, it's a lot different to the outfielders, and I think it's really an area that this season especially I've studied a lot, in terms of looking at how they actually move, and how I can sort of help embed stuff into their gym programs, sort of help improve their their power on the pitch, and sort of I think the lateral movements is so crucial, how they can get from A to B in the short space of time, and that's something that footballers don't tend to like laterally do as often. And definitely their overhead work as well, like being able to stabilize in an extended position and have that sort of strength levels to sort of lock out in that position, I think is crucial as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I suppose the other thing with it, which we also get across other positions, is different shapes and sizes of players, isn't it? Like you 100%. See some absolute monsters.
For sure, yeah. And that's often the case. Like you see goalkeepers, oh God, they can barely fit in the door. They're absolutely massive, But like then, even within that, you're kind of saying, right, goalkeepers, similar sort of movement qualities, but then you're dealing with player A and B that are two different people, So player A might need a little bit more something else than player B might, but that's why we love it.
Yeah, 100%. Mate, the other thing I wanted to cover was around injuries.
Yeah,
and hopefully something that you don't have too much experience in, but at the
no,
same time, you've got to upskill. So
100%. Yeah,
long-term injuries specifically. So dealing with players that are going to be somewhat away from the team, which is maybe an area of debate,
yeah.
but certainly away from the pitch for a period. How you go about that and the sort of role you feel you take with a player in that position as well.
Yeah, I think it's, as you said, it's never a nice one. You have a player with a long-term injury and they're down, the club's down, you're potentially losing a really good player for a long period of time. It's never a nice time. But I think when you strip it back and when the sort of trauma of it sort of ease and calms down, I think, looking at it as a window of opportunity to sort of say, right, can we rebuild this player, this athlete, in a more stronger, robust, more basically better athlete, and sort of how can we remold them throughout the rehabilitation process to make them stronger, and when they come back, obviously mitigate the chance of obtaining a future injury. I think is absolutely crucial. So whether that's focus on the running mechanics, change of directions, work, any muscle imbalances, strength discrepancies, power discrepancies, whatever it may be, I think that's where, like, having the testing data that we collect throughout the year, and that's often something that's done to just tick a box, and we've done preseason tests and it's tick the box is ticked, and then it's never seen again. It's stored away in the computer, it's never seen again. But I think that's where having baseline testing data and sort of known, right, physically where this athlete's strengths, where his weaknesses, and how can we make him a more rounded sort of athlete upon his return. I also think as well that whatever player it is, whether it's a real pacey winger or a strong centre half, they obviously have a super strength physically. They have something that they're really good at physically. So how can we, if that's their strength, can we make it a super strength? Can we, even further develop that so that they're coming back, even quicker, even stronger, whatever it may be. And probably the first step in the process, I think, is having that conversation with the player and saying, right, we're in this situation now. No one wants to be here. No one wants you to be out for so long, whatever injury it might be. But like, right, with this window of time, and you do get a lot of time with injured players, because you're there one-to-one with them, doing the rehab process, doing the pitch sessions, and you have a lot of coaching time with them, and obviously the different stages of rehab, early to mid looks different to mid to late, and the later we get in the rehab stage, we can make it more position specific and related to what actually they want to work on in areas of their game technically and things like that. But I just think seeing it as an opportunity to develop, and that can often be really, really hard. No one wants to hear sort of someone being jolly and upbeat when you've just heard bad news. But I think, and that's where, like, I've seen young lads working when last season, previous season, working in the academy, where they get an injury and it's a setback, and it's an awful time. They're only kind of trying to start develop their career, and next thing they've a huge setback, and it's the worst thing in the world. They're doing something every day, playing football on the pitch, and next thing it's gone. It's that they're not able to do it. So sometimes I think having an early, and again, touch wood, like, not many people, can get injured, but like it's one of those where I think if you experience an injury early on in your career, it makes you appreciate the sort of work that goes on around the training pitch. The importance of your pre-activation, your recovery work, your sleep, hydration, nutrition. I just think, it makes you realize that there's so much to this than just going out on the pitch and playing football for, 80, 90 minutes. And having that, in a way, I've seen players come back and they're more mature now. They take ownership of what their own individual needs are, because ultimately, you're looking after individuals within the team, and each individual player has individual needs, and they would all have sort of bespoke injury prevention programs and activation programs, but they're not in an environment where it's a one-to-one sort of coach to player, coach player ratio. So often, you might get around to everyone within the day in terms of, checking in with players, overseeing players, how they're getting on with their activation or mobility work, whatever it may be. So, but yeah, I think going back, it's never a nice time with long-term injuries. I think the mental side to it is absolutely key. Last season I was really fortunate enough to work with psychologists at Portsmouth. Jackie Flynn was absolutely brilliant with the guys, and with a couple of lads out injured, and I worked with him a lot because I kind of felt that, right, if I'm going to be seeing these players every day, I need to make sure that the language that I use with these players and what I say and, you know, my body language and everything, it needs to be spot on, because it only takes one or two conversations to sort of kill the progress that they've made and sort of kill their confidence. And, you know, it's one of those where, like, I think as performance staff, we see them at their lowest. You know, the coaches don't tend to see them when they're at that very low point. And it's sort of, I think that's a real skill, is how do we sort of pick them up from there and build their confidence. And I think the psychology side of things is going to become, you know, really, really popular in years to come, you know, in the next couple of years anyway. I just think it's really important, because that can often be the difference between definitely teams winning and losing, you know, games and things like that. But I think on the injury side of things, just having that confidence in your own ability, having that mental strength, you know, resilience to keep going and actually come back stronger. You know, especially you've seen players like that suffer re-injuries. You know, God, I couldn't think of anything worse in the world than just going back, feeling like you're going back to square one, but then sort of saying, right, well, you know, it's a bump in the road. You know, we accept that, right? How can we, you know, put everything aside and just move forward? You know, keep controlling the controllables and sort of working towards getting back, you know. But I think, and then, you know, you look at sort of the back end of the rehab stage, when, you know, players get back on the grass, and that's where I think it becomes a little bit more real. You know, that's when the sort of players can see the light at the end of the tunnel. That's when the coaches can see the players coming back. I think it's always hard when the players and the coaches and the manager are sort of distance, in the sense that you have the player in the gym every single day, the manager's on the pitch, coach on the pitch, and, you know, they might go by where the manager doesn't actually see more importantly, the player doesn't see the manager or the coaches. You know, and ultimately they're the people that of the most importance, because they pick the team, they sort of, you know, are responsible for their development on the pitch. And I think when you get back on the pitch in the sort of late rehab stage, I think it's, you know, it's a lot easier, because the coaches are around the place. You know, the players sort of building confidence, because you're working on stuff that they kind of feel, God, this is actually position specific. You know, this is what I want to do. I'm a fullback, I want to overlap, but they don't really realize, right, I'm actually looking at high speed running here, you know, but they're thinking, you know, you have to cross in the box. And, you know, I think that's, for me, that's an enjoyable stage, because you can kind of see, right, everything coming together. But it's, you know, it's obviously important then to not rush the player too quick, and he's keen and eager to get back when you can see all his mates playing to the side of him. But yeah, I think, you know, having that realism to the final stage is key as well, you know, so you can kind of replicate the demands of what the next step is, which is going back into a training environment. So be that, you know, intensity levels, meterage per minute, can we match that? And again, it's hard when you're one-to-one with a player. You know, you're trying to create drills that sort of replicate the demands of the game. But, you know, can we tick off the training load that he's previously hit, the maximum speed that he's previously hit, you know, all these sort of markers? Can we make sure he's coming back in a really good state at the end?
Yeah, brilliant. No, it's fascinating. I think that psychology side and the language is so important, especially in the early stages, isn't it? Because that's where you might have a good relationship with the player, but if you're not talking their language, and that you're getting them in a very vulnerable, emotional position, aren't you? Especially with longer term injuries, it's you're treading on thin ice, aren't you? And you need to be very careful at that point.
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
And then the other thing that you mentioned, Paul, was about sort of players learning from getting the injuries, and I suppose that's human nature in a way, isn't it? That we can, like the child in us, isn't it? You get told, right, don't touch that, don't touch that, don't touch that. You touch it, and it's hot. And then you learn. And I suppose it's the same thing in a way, isn't it? Like you need to do your prehab because X, Y, and Z. And then a player gets an injury, and then they that's when they learn. So there's a balance to that, isn't there? Where we have to educate, like you said. But sometimes players have to, unfortunately, go through these scenarios. That's when they will learn.
I remember speaking to a coach before, and, you know, he was saying, like, same player just wouldn't look after his recovery, wouldn't look after his, you know, nutrition, anything around, and could sort of see that, right, there's an injury waiting to happen here. Now, not that you want players to be injured, of course you don't, but like this was being flagged on, you know, wellness and things like that we in a lot of teams will track, you know, regularly, with muscle soreness, fatigue, and things like that, sleep quality. And, you know, player ended up picking up an injury and a muscle strain. And it was only then afterwards that the coach sat down with the player and said, right, well, picked up that muscle strain. Can we look back at now the last week or the last 10 days, 14 days, whatever it may be, have a look at sort of the patterns that emerged. You weren't sleeping great. You weren't looking after your nutrition. You weren't looking after your recovery. Whether that's the reason, no one really knows, but that's something that's definitely within your control that might have prevented that. So I think sometimes it can be a real learning opportunity. It's not something that you want to experience with players for sure, but I think sort of using it and maximizing the learning opportunity in it is important.
Yeah, definitely. The other thing, mate, you mentioned before is about data. And coming from a maths background, I should be. I imagine these spreadsheets are unbelievable. But just on that, utilizing data, obviously something you talked about, which is the really important side of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
How do you go about that? How do you go about prioritizing certain elements of data and also not disregarding, but collecting things that need to be collected just in case? But this is our focus.
Yeah, I think the live GPS data, I think, is crucial. And that's something we would monitor every day in training to see, our players reaching the expectations or the demands of what the session should be. Do players need to be maybe, pushed a little bit more? They're not doing enough. Do they need to be pulled back a little bit? And I think that's for us to see as coaches and coaches only as such. I think we need to be careful with what sort of information we share with the players, especially around training days. Players it's human nature to become obsessed with numbers. Objective data is everyone wants to sort of see, where am I in relation to him? Am I better? Am I worse? They don't really care what the score is. They want to just know where they are in the squad. And I think being clever with that is key. Like, we've been lucky at Port Vale to have a lot of investment in testing equipment. So we've got access to the Vale testing equipment, the ForceX, Force Frame, Norboard as well, which we'd use to sort of monitor fatigue as well as strength and power. So we would monitor fatigue every match day +2, and the players would do a couple of sub-max efforts and then a maximum effort, and we would kind of see, right, relative to their sort of baseline scores, where are they way below, way above, or sort of in around in between. But also, as well as that, I think creating sort of healthy competition within the squad is key. So sort of having a leaderboard as such, even for example jump heights, that's player A is top of the squad in jump heights, and it just creates a little bit more buy-in, saying, right, you're doing a gym session, that can actually help impact your jump height when you're going to retest it. And yeah, just being kind of clever with that sort of stuff. I think with any sort of testing data, if you're collating it, there's so much out there to test, so many metrics and so many things to measure. But I think anything you do has to be done with 100% intent, unless it's obviously a sub-max, endurance tests, aerobic tests, whatever it may be. But I think it has to be done with intent. Like, I remember looking at, with academies, the EPPP requirements means that you have to test regularly throughout the season. And, it's something that I think testing is great, but if it's not done right, there's no point doing it, because, if players don't understand the test or the value in it, if they're not given 100% in test, it's not a true value, it's not a true reading of where they are. So I was kind of looking at this and saying, right, there's no way that the quickest player on the team on a GPS vest is like the 5th quickest on a 30-meter sprint. So I'm kind of looking at that and saying, right, that's not right. And then, you sort of add in competition, and you look at kind of in a game, there's competition, there's players racing against each other, and certainly they're going to sprint as quick as they possibly can. Then they come into an isolated environment, a 30-meter sprint, it's probably lashing rain, they don't have footballs at their feet, and they're sort of saying, yeah, I'm sprinting, but is it maximum? Who will know? Only the player. So I think we need to be careful with some of the testing data and sort of be clever with what we sort of use as kind of real testing data, because I think some of the speed gates and all, they're absolutely brilliant for getting speed over 5 meters, 10 meters, 20, and so on. But are they real true values of maximum speed? Because I haven't seen any players clock higher top end speeds, maximum velocity on a speed gate, as opposed. And what I mean by that, by using, say, wearing a GPS vest and doing a maximum effort on speed gates, as opposed to what I often do would say be a 1v1 race. At the end of a warm-up, players, right, you're going off my movement. So as soon as I go, we're racing against each other. But as soon as that competitive element is there, straight away 100% intent. So, I think we just need to be careful what sort of data we use and how we use the data from some of the testing.
Yeah, 100%. I used to say when I worked in academy football that you'd be doing a sprint test and you'd have a kid waving to the dad halfway down the track, and you're like,
no, you're not supposed to do
use this?
I know, but and then you kind of spend so much time going through the data. I think, whatever about actually testing, but then you spend so much time analyzing the data, going through it all, and you're kind of like, right, you give the data to the coaches, then in the end you kind of say, right, well, this is the data for your squad, but I'm not 100% sure if it's 100% accurate, and you're kind of like, well, was it worthwhile? You don't know. But I think it's really important to have, objective data. If we look at, say, medical procedures, signing players, I think it's really important to get a well-rounded picture of that individual before you make, obviously, decisions on players, whether you sign them or not, but also to have as baseline data, because like that, you don't know when a player can get injured. And the last thing you want to be doing, I think, is, right, crap, player's injured, we're scrambling through data to sort of see where strength level's at, and the last measure you took is a year ago or 6 months, and it's not real then. So I think having sort of something that can be repeated regularly, and that's where I think the Vale system has come in really, really useful with us.
Yeah, brilliant, mate. That was class. Paul, let's move on to our quick fire questions now. So the first one being, who have been some of the biggest influences on your career so far?
Yeah, so obviously family and close friends will be number one, but I think probably professionally out there outside of that, some of the coaches I've worked with, and far too many to name them all, but like coaches I've worked with in Ireland, the UK, at the different clubs, I've really learned something off each of them. And I think that's, definitely an advantage to experiencing different environments, is you learn off people without even realizing that. You pick up different things, you pick up good practice, and also you pick up sort of not so good practice. You kind of see, right, I mightn't have done it in this way, I might have tweaked it a certain way or whatever. But yeah, definitely the coaches I've worked with, probably two coaches at the moment that I kind of look up to and say, God, I really admire their leadership style. It would be Jim Gavin and Jim McGuinness. Gavin obviously really successful with Dublin, and Jim McGuinness, I really admire Jim McGuinness, the way he's just thrown himself into different environments, football, Gaelic football, just different sports and different environments, and how he can sort of transfer his skills into different environments. He spoke actually on a recent block of my A license, and I'm not great with sitting during talks, like I kind of get bored fairly easily, but literally you couldn't hear a pin drop. It was a captivating talk. He kind of, everyone's interest, no one kind of moved for the duration of the talk. And then what really got me was how he inspires people. Everyone came out of the room feeling really inspired, and we were just listening to how he inspires people. But I think that sort of learning off people that have worked in really successful elite environments, and how they sort of went about it, was amazing to sort of hear firsthand, on how he done it, and the level of detail as well, that I kind of think that's the difference between sort of sub-elite and elite level, is the detail, the level of detail, and the planning and the prep. And geez, the amount of detail he went into was absolutely amazing. So they'd be definitely the two for me.
Brilliant. What would you say your biggest strength is as a practitioner?
Oh, I don't like talking about myself.
That's why I include this one.
I know, yeah. I'd probably say my interpersonal skills. I'd like to say that I'm a sort of bubbly person. I like to kind of be a laugh around the place. Have a joke, have a laugh, and sort of just be a good person to be around. Well, try most of the time, but yeah, you'd probably have to ask the lads I work with, and they probably say I'm annoying. They definitely say I eat all the food as well. So
that's a trait that's going to be carried across a few coaches, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely, 100%.
Paul, going back a few years now, when maybe even to sort of going through the teaching qualification and all the rest of it, what would be your top bit of advice, career advice for yourself?
Yeah, first and foremost, leave the teaching degree and go into sports science. I think, I look back now and say, right, I'm definitely at a disadvantage to other people because, I think scientific knowledge, a lot of people have a greater bank of knowledge, and I've had that chance to obtain a lot more knowledge than me. But I think I look back now and say, I'm actually glad that I done my teaching qualification, because I think I developed skills that are a lot tougher to develop. You can't learn them in a textbook. Whereas I think nowadays there's so much research online that I think, you only have to go onto Google Scholar or different Twitter pages, or, there's so much research out there, and you can really just be a student of the internet really nowadays. So I'm glad I did do my teaching qualification, and it's something, I never know, I might go back to in the future. But I think probably aside from that, just ask more questions. I think probably earlier on in my career I was a little bit hesitant to sort of, kind of be found out, or sort of, say something that people might say, God, how do you not know the answer to this? But I'm kind of the polar opposite now, where I ask so many questions, and I'd always encourage people to ask me questions, because I think if I can't explain it well enough, I ultimately don't know it well enough. So I think having that environment, and it's tough that, like, you don't want someone that's sort of saying why all the time, because it's finding the balance and the sort of right way to say it. But I do think it is a really sort of good thing to be in an environment where, things are questioned, because ultimately, if you've two people with two ideas, and question each other, the cream rises to the top, the sort of, and ultimately that can be a combination of, right, combining ideas, actually coming to another conclusion that neither person kind of, initially thought of. So I think just having that environment, that constructive environment is key.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. And for young coaches as well, I think it's important to understand that if you ask a question and you don't get a response, or you get like quite a cold response, it's probably more about the other person than it is yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And like, even, I always say interns and stuff like that, it's, you're going to send loads of emails and text messages and stuff like that, and people won't get back to you. And it's really tough, and that's what it's hard not to take it personally when it's you at the time. But like, to kind of see, right, well, I'm actually doing the right thing in terms of reaching out to people, trying to gain experience, so to not sort of be set back or put down by people not getting back, because ultimately, if they're not really interested, to reply, that's not the right environment for you to be in. So if you do get someone that does, is interested, is reply, go and see the environment, go and see what sort of person you have, because they're obviously interested in developing you.
Yeah, brilliant. Mate, the final one. What's your approach to CPD, continued learning? Like, how do you go about that?
Yeah, so currently at the moment, I'm doing my A license. So it's something that was kind of big on, obviously, from when I started coaching, was to keep continuing on with my coaching badges. I think it's important now for S&C coaches, performance staff, to be able to actually understand what the manager wants, but then actually to be able to replicate that in warm-ups, conditioning drills, things like that. So that's something I'm hopeful to complete soon. And then just for me at the moment, research around sort of early stage rehab, medical information, things like that, because that's something that I don't really have a background in, and I want to sort of upskill myself on, because ultimately I'm working really, really closely with the physios every single day, and I need to understand ultimately what they want and what they're talking about, and how we can sort of work together to bring about change and stuff in the players. So that would be definitely one for me. I think it's probably like informal chats as well with coaches, and on the training pitch, away from the training pitch, just like chatting informally. I think that's absolutely so valuable, with just chatting to people, even coaches I've been with previous clubs, we all have similar problems regarding, say, GPS, whatever, certain things with injuries, just having that sort of relationship to be able to pick up the phone and, not give too much away, but sort of just, have a conversation. And then I kind of think social media nowadays is, it's just flooded with information. Like, I think obviously podcasts like this one, absolutely brilliant for just gaining information. And, on Twitter, Instagram, so many pages now that, you just have to go onto a certain app and you just see lots of exercises, variations of doing things. So I'd kind of try and follow a lot of them sort of pages. So, you know, when I'm going on Instagram, I don't feel too guilty for spending an hour on
it. Mate, brilliant. You mentioned social media there. If people have got questions or they want to reach out in general, where would you direct them?
Yes, probably Twitter is the best place. I'm pretty sure it's just Paul Mcgrath Twitter on Twitter. So just my name.
Brilliant. Awesome, mate. I really appreciate you coming on. That's been class catching up. And yeah, really excited for you in the role, because I know it's relatively new still at the moment. I know you've got a long time ahead of you at the club as well. So yeah, all the best for this season, mate.
Perfect. Cheers, Ben. Thanks for having me on.